There was an ominous silence in the air as we approached the edge of town. The clamor and hustle of city life had been replaced by the soft murmur of the wind. As it turned out, there was a pretty good reason for the weird, muted atmosphere. Everyone was dead. Every single person in the entire town. Most of the victims had been decapitated. Every now and then we'd encounter a body with its head still attached by a ragged strip of flesh. And that was somehow worse. I knew the bodies weren't real, but that didn't make it any better. Once again, it just made it worse. Falling Sky finally broke the silence. He stopped in the middle of the street, his tail swishing in agitation. "This is dark magic. He's a clever one, this bookman of yours. We can't ask any questions if there's no one left to answer them." My head was throbbing like a rotten tooth. I rubbed my temples again and suppressed the urge to start screaming. I grumbled. "Yeah, this is definitely a setback. Population sign of the city limits claim just over 40,000 people. It'll take forever to check out every parlor room in town. It's gonna be a lot of frickin' houses. I don't even know if I would recognize it, to be honest. Her habitat might be different from the original room." Falling Sky grunted. "Well, either way, get off my back. Ride's over. And remember what I said to you back at the farm, Billy Whitebread. Never tell anyone you rode on my back. That stays between us until the end of days." I awkwardly dismounted from his back and snorted. "Tell who? I'm not even supposed to be here. I doubt Vic would be okay with any of this shit. You know what I mean? Anyway, what now? I think we're screwed." I started to walk around in the street in aimless circles, deep in thought. I was gripped by a sense of impending doom. Dead bodies lined every street in all directions. They were hanging from open windows and dangling from carriages. Hundreds of bodies, thousands of them, as far as the eye could see. I could hardly wrap my head around it. "We don't need the spirit world for this part of our journey," Falling Sky answered in a wry tone. "The place you're looking for exists in the present." Understanding struck me like a bolt of lightning. I said, "We need to go back. Wait for me and your Hogan until I find some answers. I'll try to be quick, but I don't know. I don't even know what I'm looking for." Falling Sky gave me a wondered look. He said, "Take me with you." "Come on, I never get to go anywhere." I shook my head and snorted. "Are you nuts? There's all those microphones and cameras and shit. If Vic found out you left your habitat, he'd let Len throw me off a rooftop. And after that shit I pulled on him a while back, Len would be more than happy to oblige. He isn't my biggest fan these days." The skinwalker stomped his hoof in a petulant display of disappointment. He flared his nostrils and retorted, "You said Vic doesn't know what happens around the zoo. I'll turn into a field mouse and hide in your pocket. He'd never know." I rubbed my temples and muttered, "Well, Kaz would know. And I'll be honest with you, man, I'm not sure if that would be such a good thing." Falling Sky did a double take, trotted closer to me. He lowered his voice and whispered, "You think Casimir is the informer?" "You don't have to whisper. It's not like Kaz could hear us." Look, I don't know for sure, but maybe yes, maybe no. Vic killed his assistant because the dude was plotting to sabotage the zoo somehow, but how did Vic even find out? I mean, I doubt this dude was running his mouth about his plans, but I can see how it might be tempting to share the secret with someone close to him. You get what I'm saying here? So, yeah. I don't know anything for sure, but I have my suspicions. The horse shimmered and flickered for a moment, and then Falling Sky was standing before me in all his human glory. He squeezed my shoulder and said, "Suspicion is always better than blind trust. All right then. I'll just take it easy and watch TV in my Hogan for a while." He smirked at me and added, "Don't forget, you drank the tea. Me, I'll be fine, but you? This should be interesting. Another story for the ancestors. Oh, and they're gonna love this one." I grimaced at him and said, "Hell. Yeah, I forgot about that. This is gonna suck. But it is what it is. Okay, man. I'm as ready as I'll ever be. Let's do this. I closed my eyes, and I imagined I was hanging onto that rope again. Only this time, I didn't let go. Instead, I climbed to the top, my body weightless and ethereal in the nexus between life and death. When I reached the top of the rope, I opened my eyes to the real world. Unfortunately, in the real world, I was a hot, sloppy mess of a human being. Nausea hit me with a closed fist, and I collapsed onto my hands and knees in the sand. Falling Sky shook his head at me as a spray of puke poured into the dirt. He said, "The sacred tea isn't for beginners. It's heavy. Very heavy. You should probably just hide yourself away in my hogan until you come down. Or watch TV and smoke some tobacco. What do you say? I'll turn on the lava lamp. We'll ride the waves." I squeezed my eyes shut and moaned. I'm regretting this pretty bad. I can't do this. I was wrecked. No joke. My thoughts were skittering around my brain like alien spiders. The world around me was a soft, focused nightmare of contrails, monstrous shapes, and shifting patterns. I could hardly bear to open my eyes. The intercom came to life with a loud click, and Casimir's voice crackled over the speakers overhead. "You require assistance, Billy. You don't look like you're doing very well." I flapped my hands in a dismissive gesture and yelled back, "No, I'm good. I don't need anything. Just give me a minute, okay?" I turned back to the skinwalker and croaked, "Give me a hand over here. I'm not sure if I can walk on my own. The floor keeps moving." Falling Sky made a rude noise with his lips and said, "Unless you're done getting sick. No offense, Billy, but I can't take it when people throw up. The sound, the smell, no thanks. Makes me want to throw up too." I gritted my teeth and groaned. "Just come here for a second, man. I gotta tell you something, okay? He was already shaking his head no. I snarled, "For fuck's sake," and forced myself to stand up. I just had to ride the waves. How hard could it be? I took a deep breath and told myself, it's not real. None of it is real. Just ignore what you see, put one foot in front of the other. I grew more confident with each step. Falling Sky clapped me on the shoulder as I drew closer. He said, "That's it, Billy Whitebread. Just stay afloat, you'll be okay." He ushered me into his hogan and tried to make me sit down in a chair made of woven branches. I said, "No, I'm okay now. Kind of okay. Listen, man, I changed my mind about you staying here. I need someone who's got it together, and Kaz already said that he doesn't want to get involved. I mean, even if he did want to help, we can't both be inside the habitat at the same time, so it's got to be you. No other choice." A smile spread around the skinwalker's face. He rubbed his hands together and said, "My physical being hasn't been outside these walls for many years. Going to enjoy this." I softly replied, "Keep it down, okay? Listen, don't get any ideas about escaping, okay? We're going straight to Catherine's habitat, then we're coming right back. Remember, Vic knows your true name. If you manage to get past the goons, Vic will speak it out loud just out of spite, okay? As long as he can still talk, you're stuck here in the zoo." Falling Sky held up his hands and protested, "No need to get firm with me, Billy. I'm just happy to be doing something new." I growled, "I'm glad you're having a good time. Me, not so much. Your face is melting, walls are breathing, everything's fucked. I just want to curl up in a ball and start babbling about the universe. I can hardly think straight. This isn't fun, man. It sucks." Falling Sky shook a finger at me and countered, "Maybe you're the one who sucks, Billy Whitebread. You ever thought of that? You have a good heart, yes, but you're always complaining. No, don't deny it. You're a cry monkey and you know it. Do you have a very angry, domineering kind of mother? Because an overbearing mother figure can often be the root of a lot of issues." I snapped, "Oh, good. Skinwalker Freud. Not now, okay? Just do your thing, Mr. Mouse, and let's go. You're going for a pocket ride." Kaz raised an eyebrow at me as I came stumbling into the service tunnel. He said, "You look like a maniac. Your hair is dripping with sweat and your eyes are like saucers." I muttered, the tea's kicking my ass. "How long have I been gone?" The big Russian gave me a ghost of a smile as he gently said, You did not go anywhere. You sat on a log for perhaps 10 minutes, then you began to vomit into the sand. I let out an off-kilter giggle and said, Time's different over there. Look, we have to go back to Catherine's habitat. We need to find something. Don't ask me what, because I don't really know just yet. But I guess we'll figure it out when we see it. Kaz paused in mid-step, and he gave me a considering look. He asked, Who's we, Billy? I cannot go inside. I must stand watch at the door. I froze, and my poor, drugged-up brain started to panic. I felt my stupid yapper drop open, and I stammered, I didn't we. No, I wanted to say me, not we. Just me, alone, falling skies, and as soon as the last sentence started to cross my lips, I had to restrain myself from clapping my hands over my mouth. Kaz gave me another probing stare, but he stayed silent and followed me down the tunnel. I tried my best to walk like a normal human being. I just had to sail the waves, one foot in front of the other as I navigated the spaces between. If I didn't think about it too hard, I could keep moving forward. Felt like I was doing it all wrong, but at least I was moving. When he got to the entrance of Catherine's habitat, I asked Kaz to punch in the code. Pushing the buttons in the correct order was a tad beyond my ability at that point. He wordlessly obliged, but he stopped me as I was about to lurch across the threshold of the habitat. He said, Remember to watch in the mirror. Do not get yourself killed. I gave him a blank look. Then I snorted, Yeah, of course, as I fumbled for the mirror in question. Truth be told, I'd forgotten about it entirely. I know that sounds really fucking stupid, but keep in mind that I could barely form a rational thought at that point. Mirror now safely in hand, I stepped into the habitat and the door slid shut behind me. I found the poltergeist sitting in her rocking chair, her severed head resting in her lap as usual. I approached her with extreme caution. She watched me shuffle closer with a hopeful expression on her face. Even in my confused state of psychedelic delirium, I felt my heart shrivel a bit in my chest. I desperately wished I had some good news to share, but I didn't. I was failing. I tried to order my thoughts before I spoke. It was really difficult. That's putting it mildly. It was almost like someone had smashed open an ant farm in my brain and I was attempting to round up the entire colony with a pair of chopsticks. Just a fuckload of these speedy guys running skitter-scatter all over the floor, and there I was, trying not to step on them as I clacked my little sticks together. Finally, I blurted out, I'm still trying to figure it out, all this, this whole situation's kind of fucked up, right? So, I did some drugs and I went to the spirit world. At first I was like, oh man, this sucks. And there's all these fucking fog everywhere. I can't see anything. But then I freed my mind and the universe answered by setting up a sort of like this old-timey version of our own city. But it was like back in your time on the day of your funeral. It was kind of like one of those dinner theater murder mysteries. But then I had to come back here to the present because the bookman killed everyone in the... It trailed off, and we looked at each other for a few moments in the mirror. Her hopeful expression had crumpled into a look of crushing, miserable disappointment. I sighed. Look, I'm doing my best to find his name, but he's doing his best to stop me. I need your help. A man's voice came drifting out of my pocket. He said, We need your help. We as in more than one. Two, in fact. I was very rude, Billy Whitebread. Wasn't it the wise and knowledgeable Falling Sky who showed you the path to freeing your mind? I've been with you every step of the way on this journey. That was very rude. I glared into my pocket and hissed, Be quiet, man, not so loud. Catherine was staring at me with great interest. She lifted her head into the air for a better look. I tried my best to shield my hands from the cameras, and I showed her the talking mouse who was stowed away in my pocket. The poltergeist was mesmerized by the spectacle. Her expression softened into a look of wonder. The skinwalker stood up on his tiny hind legs, and he lifted a paw in greeting. He said, My name is Falling Sky. We want to help you, Catherine, but we need to learn the bookman's real name. Do you know what it is? Catherine silently mouthed, No, and her lower lip started to quiver. Tears welled up in her eyes. In a gentle tone, Falling Sky said, Don't despair, little one. We won't let him win. Please, tell us everything you can remember about him. I nodded in agreement and said, Any little detail might help. What was your relationship to him? Was he your teacher? A neighbor? Catherine slid out of the rocking chair and walked over to the fireplace. She tucked her head under her arm and plucked a knick-knack from the mantelpiece with her free hand. Solemnly, she held it out for inspection. It was a ceramic figurine of a fluffy sheep. Catherine put the figurine back on the shelf, and then she knelt down to write something in the cold ashes of the fireplace. When she was done, she tapped the word for emphasis. Falling Sky looked up at me and whispered, "I never learned how to read English. What does it say?" I blew out a frustrated sigh and muttered, "It says person." And the figure was a sheep, so... what, a shepherd? A human shepherd? I don't know what the hell she means by any of this shit. I don't know, man. I think I'm just fucking a terrible fucking detective. Like, I suck at this so bad. I wish she could just show me what happened somehow, but that's... Catherine abruptly seized me by the wrist, making me falter in mid-sentence. Falling Sky let out a startled squeak and jumped out of my hand. As her ghostly fingers encircled my living flesh, a painful jolt ran up my arm and slammed into my brain, and then I found myself somewhere else. Not another place, but another time and another existence. It was the 1890s, and I was Catherine. I was cowering in the parlor with the curtains drawn shut. I was hiding because the person was visiting with Mother in the drawing room. I didn't know the person's name. He was always carrying a large book under his arm, so I thought of him as the Bookman. I was terrified of the Bookman. He was very tall, and his demeanor was cold and stern. He was always surrounded by a disagreeable odor of old pipe tobacco and animal dung. When the weather was foul, the Bookman wore a long black coat with a hood that hid most of his face. All you could see was his curled smile, and the rest was obscured in shadow. All of this was frightening enough on its own, but the real reason I was afraid of the Bookman was his smile. There was something awful lurking behind that carotid, nicotine-stained grin. He was hungry. Mother couldn't see it, but I could. I didn't know what he was hungry for, but I could sense it was very bad. Mother often referred to the Bookman as our good shepherd, but he wasn't a shepherd at all. He was a wolf. Mother didn't understand why I was afraid of the Bookman, and try as I might, I couldn't seem to adequately put my fear into words. She thought it was all very silly. I knew my fear of the person made her quite annoyed with me, so whenever he came to our house, I just tried my best not to be seen. I sat there in the gloom and listened as their voices drifted down the hall from the sitting room. Mother laughed at something the Bookman said, and then the voices began to move further away. Before long, I heard the front door open. When it closed again, I felt a flood of relief wash through my entire body. He was gone. I pulled the curtains back, and the pale light of a gray afternoon illuminated the parlor. Mother called out, "Catherine! I must be off to do the shopping. Mind yourself while I'm gone. Stay out of mischief. And don't open the door for strangers." She stepped out into the porch. The deadbolt slid home, and I was left all alone in our big, silent house. Mother was still searching for a new governess, and the maid only came on Tuesdays and Fridays. I wandered about the house for a while, and then I selected a picture book from the bookshelf and sat down in my rocking chair. The rocking chair had been gifted by Father on my 7th birthday. When you're only 7, everything around you seems like it was made for a giant, but my rocking chair was perfect for me and only me. In my opinion, it was the finest chair in the whole world. I sat there, rocking and daydreaming, with the book forgotten in my lap, when I was startled by a rapid knocking at the front door. I peeked out the window to see who it was, and my heart crawled into my throat. It was the Bookman. He had returned, and Mother wasn't here to protect me from his hungry smile. He saw the curtain twitch, and he stared at the window with narrowed eyes. I dropped to the floor and huddled against the wall. The Bookman knocked again, and then a third time. When no one answered, the Bookman finally turned away. I heard his boots clomping down the steps, and then There was silence. I waited for a minute or two before I dared to peek out the window again. There was no sign of him in the street. I let out a huge sigh of relief, and I ran back to the parlor. I rounded the corner and crashed into his legs. While I had been cowering and praying for him to go away, the bookman had slipped to the back of the house and pried open a window. I staggered away from his savage smile, my heart slamming in my chest. I wanted to run, but my legs felt sluggish and heavy. I tried to yell at the top of my lungs, but nothing came out except for a tiny squeak of terror. His eyes glittered in the dim light of the gray afternoon. He stooped down to look into my face, his hands planted on his knees, and he said, "Such a pretty girl. Do you believe yourself to be innocent? You're not innocent. Not at all. You're an unrepentant sinner. Isn't that so, Catherine? Or should I call you by your true name? Lilith, Jezebel, harlot." I cowered against the wall. The bookman leaned even closer. He was breathing heavily and his breath was hot and putrid. He crooned, "It's written in the good book. The faithful will bring their children to see the shepherd so he can lay his hands on them and pray." The bookman inhaled deeply, savoring my fear like the finest perfume. He continued, "The disciples rebuked their presence, but the shepherd told them, 'Suffer the little children to come unto me, because anyone who doesn't receive God as a little child, he shall not enter heaven.' Do you understand the meaning of his words? I want to save you, my child. Receive me, and I will deliver you to God." I suddenly became aware that his hands were tugging at the fastenings on my dress. My paralysis finally broke. I darted past him and ran for the door, screaming for Mother with every step. The bookman caught me as I was pawing at the deadbolt. He clamped his callous hands over my face, suffocating my terrifying wailing, and he dragged me back to the parlor. He was growling like a dog in the grip of a terrible rage. His eyes were blazing like hellfire. A butcher's knife appeared from a fold in his cloak. The sharp tip was pressed against my throat. I cried out for Mother, but she wasn't there to save me. It was just me, the wolf, and his hunger. Panting his foul breath into my face, the bookman snarled, "You will receive me, young Jezebel. You will receive me. You will receive me." The blade was shoved into my neck, and I felt a sharp snap across my entire being, like a rubber band that had been stretched to its limits, then released to fly across the room. In the next instant, I was curled up on the floor in Catherine's habitat. Back in my own time. I was screaming. Falling Sky was running in agitated circles on the floor, and Casimir was demanding to know what the hell was going on over the intercom. I sat up and wiped a stream of tears from my eyes. My heart was pounding in my chest. I called out, I'm okay, man. I'm fucking hell. I'm okay." I cleared my throat and added, "Just hang on a minute." I scooped up Falling Sky with trembling hands, and I tucked him back into my pocket. I whispered, "Stay quiet, man, we're almost in the clear." He whispered back, "I thought you were dying, Billy Whitebread. Glad you're still alive." I let out a shaky little breath and murmured, "Me too, buddy. Me too." Kaz was waiting with crossed arms and a stern look as I exited the habitat. He rumbled, "You fell to the ground and you began to scream. I'm starting to wonder if I should allow this to continue. I closed my eyes against the undulations of the walls. It was making me feel sick. I croaked. She reached out and grabbed my arm, and then I watched it happen through her own eyes. Her murder. I fucking saw who did it, Kaz. Starting to think that it was, the whatchamacallit, at the church. The clergyman or whatever, you know? He was, like, conveniently absent when we visited the church, and I thought it was kind of weird. Plus the whole thing about the book and teaching and shepherds and sheep and all that shit, you know? But this guy, I don't think he was a preacher. He looked pretty rough. He smelled like sheep shit. I think he was a shepherd, like an actual shepherd, like not a metaphorical one. Kaz gave me a vaguely puzzled look and said, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I believe you. Never mind, man. Just a bunch of stuff that happened on the other side. It's like, I don't understand why a dude like that would ever be a regular guest of a wealthy family. I mean, especially back then. And there's that book that he was always carrying under his arm. Like, what was it? I kind of assumed it was a Bible, but now I'm not so sure. Casimir looked thoughtful. He said, perhaps he butchered his own livestock and delivered the meat to clients around the city. The book could be a business ledger where he would write down dates and payment information. It is possible. I frowned in concentration, mulling it over, and shook my head. I don't know, but I'm going to find out. I'm going to go back and find this evil motherfucker, back to the spirit world. Casimir looked troubled. He peered down at my sweaty, pallid face and asked, are you sure this is a good idea? You look terrible. I snorted. Well, let's see. I'm high as fuck, and I've seen like a zillion dead bodies tonight, not to mention I was just horribly murdered in a ghostly vision, so how am I supposed to look, man? Jeez, just give me a break over here. I hesitated. I sighed. Man, I want to level with you here, okay? I might be in danger. I felt an angry little scuffle in my pocket, and I added, Falling Sky too. We're both probably in danger. The bookman, he isn't an ordinary spirit. It's like he became something a lot more dangerous. I think he's trying to avoid, actually fucking killing us, but it's not because he's a nice guy. He's pretty much pure evil, and believe me, this guy is going to do what he needs to do. Kaz winced at the news, and he gravely shook his head. We already have a vengeful necromancer who sends resurrected bodies to murder us. Do you really need this in your life as well? See, this is what you get for meddling in the affairs of the undead. Very well, Billy. Do as you must. All I will say is that Victor will be very displeased when he has to start looking for another assistant. I grumbled. Okay, man, yeah, thanks for the pep talk. And I headed back to Falling Sky's habitat. Kaz followed behind with a bemused expression on his face. This time I was able to ignore the landscape of rippling walls and visual distortions. I was starting to realize that our world is basically a mirage. There's a lot more stuff around us than we could ever perceive, let alone understand. Our narrow slice of reality is kind of like peering through a cosmic kaleidoscope. It can completely change with the smallest twist of the lens. In the end, the only constants are good, evil, and our profound inability to truly understand either one. Humankind is lost in a shadowland of deceitful specters and sinister illusions. We're blind to the truth, and I fear we'll never be able to see the light. When I got back to the privacy of Falling Sky's Hogan, I pulled him out of my pocket and set him on the floor. He transformed back to his true self, a middle-aged Navajo man who looked like he ate right and worked out regularly. Even though he looked pretty damn good for an 800-year-old man, there was a sadness in his eyes that was never touched by his laughter. I could sense a horrible tragedy in his past life, something so awful and unthinkable. His only choice had been to submerge the trauma into the depths of his soul. I vowed to myself that if we managed to come out of the situation in one piece, I'd convince him to talk about it. Confession, it's the first step to healing. He gave me a puzzled glance and said, "What are you staring at?" "No offense, Billy Whitebread, but I don't like you that way." I snorted. "Methinks the skinwalker doth protest too much." "Never mind, dude. We'll talk about it some other time. Ready to do this?" He smiled a little to himself and asked, "Are you ready?" "This bookman of yours will try to kill us when we get back. We're at war with a powerful enemy. He will not show us mercy." He softly replied, "Yeah, I know. Preying on the weak and innocent. That was his pastime. He was a serial killer. Wonder how many women and children he victimized when he was still alive." The skinwalker gave me a grim look. He said, "Even one is too many. He thinks he's untouchable. He's never gone to war with Falling Sky and Billy Whitebread, has he? He's about to get an unpleasant surprise." I nodded and said, "I hope so, man. I really do. Shitbags like him, they like to operate in the dark, so we'll have to drag him into the light. And then we'll let him burn." We locked eyes with each other, and the physical world fell away in strips and fragments. We were going back to finish what we started. We were going to war. Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and I just wanted to tell you thank you so much for watching tonight's video or for listening to tonight's episode of the podcast. It's a brand new year, which means a brand new time for content. We're doing our best to bring you the newest things. I know in 2024 I had released less videos than I ever had any year in the last 14 years, but hey, as things start to piece themselves back together, so do I. So I will be seeing you guys a bit more in this year, I promise you. And as always, I want to give a very big thank you to everybody who supports me over at Patreon. That's patreon.com/MrCreepyPasta. I cannot thank you guys enough. Thank you guys so much for being supporters. That goes for everybody who was down in the description, as well as Acid System, Ball Arms the Rat, Blake Rattler, Brandon Mendoza, Brenna Crow, BrimstonePandemonium, Caltuna, Chainsmoker Dealer, Chicago Hitman, Corey Kenshin, Cronut 508, Crusader Chocobo, CursepoxPrimarch, Dakota Best, Daniel Polson, Dante Kinkade, Diana Kraus, Ellie Hutmeyer, Enchanted Buns, Estabine, Gemma Halsey, Hades Nephew, himbojerry, Hour Minute Seconds Time, Jay Kearns, Jedda's Pet, Jordan Humble, King Crab, Mr. Marcus Blitz, Old Penguin, Peaceful Buddha, Psychomel, Red Shadowcat, Remember the Sun, Rinku Star, Salty Surprise, Samara Line, Seclude, SimbasBloodyMojo, Sky Harbor, Smiley the Psychotic, SullyMan, Tali Sue, the Chavez Brothers. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and sweet dreams.